Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn webinar today. My name is Kim Bussey. I'm your Key Relationship Manager, and today we are going to be talking about succession planning and recognizing and developing high potential employees. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. At the top of your screen, there's an icon of a person with their hand raised. Raise your hand if you agree or disagree with me. You can definitely select that. If you need me to speak a little louder or speak a little softer, speed up or slow down. And of course, laughter and applause is always appreciated. In addition, at the bottom of your screen, there is a please share any questions and comments here. This will be an interactive webinar, so I want your feedback. If you have any questions or comments as we go along, please go ahead and type them in for me. And if it has to do with technical issues, I've got the wonderful Carrie Bennett here helping me out as well. So let's go ahead and just dive on in. So when you think about succession planning, some of the questions that may be running through your mind is, oh my gosh, who, what, where, when, why do I need to have succession planning? Why should I? Who are the best candidates? What if my team thinks I have favorites because I'm grooming someone to move into a new position? What happens when I retire? You know, all of us would like to retire at some point, even though we love our jobs. Who's going to take my place? But you know what? I'm still in my 30s or 40s. I've got 20, 30 more years of working. I don't ever see me retiring. So why do I need to worry about it now? Well, here's the reason why. Because succession planning is critical to the success of your organization. If we go back to the poll in our lobby when as people were coming in, you know, it's 50-50. Half of you are saying my company has a succession plan. The other half is like, I think so, but it's not clearly defined. And you are not alone. Many of these companies struggle with the same thoughts, the same questions. We're going to talk about some of that. But before we go any further, let's really define what succession planning is right now. So for the purpose of our webinar, it is a process, and a process is something that is ongoing. This is not one and done. Oh, I made a succession plan. It's been the same succession plan for the past 15 years. No, a successful succession plan, say that 5 times fast, is a process for identifying and developing internal people with the potential to fill key business leadership positions in the company. So we are going to talk a little bit about externals, and really when we talk about developing internal people, it all starts from the moment of hiring. Are you hiring them just for that position? Are you also looking for those people who have that potential for the longevity as well as to move up into key positions? And if you're thinking, wow, Kim, this is really a lot of information, I don't know, let me reassure you, you are not alone. In a recent survey, 47% of business owners don't believe succession planning is necessary. And when you look at the poll from the beginning, think about that. 50% have a succession plan, 50% don't. But let me ask you this. Would you ever create a strategic or business plan where you did not say, okay, we want to grow our revenue by X number percent each year? Or for customer service, we have a standard of a 90% promoter score, customer engagement score. The answer to that is probably no. No one runs an effective, successful business by saying, oh, we're all going to do what we want to do. And that is why succession planning is so critical, because we have to understand that people are our number one expense. And so how are you going to retain those top people? How are you going to develop those high potential people? And then more importantly, how are they going to replicate each other in themselves? And that's part of that succession planning. In that same survey, 66% of those business owners that were surveyed don't have a succession plan, and 11% don't even know when to create a plan, who to work on it with, or just don't have the time. So please, 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 let's start at the beginning of why don't we have a succession plan? Well, the reason for that is starts with fear. Fear that I don't have enough time to do it. fear that this is my legacy. So if you are the owner, or even if you are a executive leader and you've spent 5, 10, 15 years in that position, building and growing that department, this is my legacy. There's that fear of the person that's coming in that you just want to say, you're not doing it the way I did it. You're doing it wrong. Or, okay, I've trained someone, so what happens to me? What do I do now? And then last but not least comes the financial piece is, can we afford to have multiple people with the same responsibilities? And what I would say to that last one is that you are training your high potentials to be able to take that responsibility. So it's not necessarily looking at it where I have the same two people doing the same job, but looking at succession planning as I have 2, 3, 4 people who have the capability of doing the same job, of having those same responsibilities so that you can move forward with it. And remember, succession planning isn't about you and what's going to happen to me, but it is about looking at it from that company perspective of what can we do to help this legacy continue to grow. However, we always look at succession planning from a personal perspective. I don't really have the time. I know, Kim. I know I need it, but I don't have the time to do it. Well, let me ask you this. When I was first starting off, I was told this is, if you don't have time to do it the right way now, when are you going to have time to go back and fix it? And that applied to, the work ethic, but I've applied that statement to many things, including my 20 years of people development of, if I don't take the time to determine who my high potentials are and work with them, when am I ever going to have the time to go back? Because here's what happens. Your high potentials, other people are going to recognize that they have high potential as well and hire them away. Or they're going to be frustrated because I know I can do this job and I can do it better, but I can do more. And so I want to challenge myself. And now I'm stuck. I can't be challenged. So when you're looking at succession planning, timing is critical and it is everything. It determines how accelerated your succession plan has to be. Do you have a top producer, top salesperson in your office who has said, I'm retiring in 5 years? Or look at the average age of your employees. Are they nearing that 60 plus and over? A lot of times I am told my client, well, I don't want them to think that I am trying to force them into retirement by introducing new people to them. Now, I want them to understand and learn how to operate their, learn their clients. They've been with me for a long time. And I understand that, but it's how you present it. It allows you to create that game plan of, one, having them share that knowledge, which streamlines your training process. It keeps your high potentials motivated. But a lot of times we also have to take that point of saying, okay, where do we want to move forward with it? And what do we want to do with it? So I'm going to go to a quick poll. Remember, I said we're going to be interactive, so I want to ask you, so when should we think about replacing those key people? When they leave? Why borrow trouble before someone leaves as part of that strategic plan? Or, you know what, our employees never leave. The second question is, who makes the best replacement? Internal employees, external employees, or it depends on the position. And then the bottom one, last not least, but go ahead and answer, what internal employees make the best successors? So I'm asking you, should we hire outside? And if so, who makes if we're hiring internally, who makes the best successors? Our top performers, someone outside the department, my favorites, because, it's like children. We say we never have favorites, but there's always that one or two that has a special place in our hearts. Or does it really matter? Can I just I have their pictures on the wall, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, shoot. Oh, Kim gets that promotion. So yes, all of you are correct. We should think about replacing key people as part of that strategic plan. And so we've got almost a 50-50 split, 44%, 50%. 50% says depends on the position. 44% say internal employees. They already know the company. And I think where it goes down to is when you know your people. So sometimes you do have those internal employees who are great. They already know the company, they're bought into the culture. But maybe it's a position that's a high level position and you know that the strategic plan is to go to a different area. We want to take it above and beyond the status quo of what we're doing. Maybe that CEO is someone who's hired in from an outside. Maybe you are restructuring departments and you want someone, we have a great service team, but we want to add a sales component. Depending on that position, you may want to take a look at the outside. And then internal employees make the best successors. 89% said top performers. Well, we'll talk about that soon. And someone's like, oh, wait, am I wrong? No, we're going to talk about why top performers can make the best successors as we look at high potentials. But then sometimes that is the number one way that you may be undermining your succession planning because your top performers aren't always the best person. And that's why it is critical when we are coming up with a succession plan to plan. So the purpose of that succession plans is it increases the availability of experienced and capable employees that are prepared, all caps, prepared to assume roles when they become available. So what are the components of creating that succession plan? Well, it starts with this. You've got to know, when do I want it? What time frame are we looking for? And so you may get off and say, we need a succession plan and we need a succession plan now. And I want it next week. Well, that would be great, but is it realistic? Because you also have to factor in these three other components. You have to know when you want it. You have to know what you want. Most critically, you have to know, how do I get there? So just like if you're taking a trip, a lot of times if you're taking a trip into an unknown location, you use your GPS, right? I know I recently took my daughter up to Atlanta to live for 10 months, and we GPSed how to get to her new home. I had an address, but I didn't know how to get there. So you may know what you want, you may know when you want it, but if you don't know how to get there, it's going to cause confusion. It's going to cause frustration. It's going to cause a lot of people to drive around aimlessly. And guess what? Your high potentials are going to drive around aimlessly and leave. And then last but not least, you want to look at who I have. So you want to write it down. You want to ask your leaders, what is needed to replace you as you move to different positions in the company. Now, make sure that you have this discussion in a way that lets them know, I'm not looking to replace you at this moment. But who do you have? How are you replicating each other? So I want you to think for a moment and type in this first box in the upper left-hand corner, what skills are needed to replace you in my current position? So it may be that they need conflict resolution, or, oh, you've got to have aggressiveness or assertiveness. But go ahead and type in there. And then also in the bottom right-hand corner, quick poll, if you left today, could someone take your position with ease? Just step right into it and operate. So absolutely share all of my knowledge. Maybe some would be easy, not so much, or no way, I'm irreplaceable. So jumping back up to this top, so leadership, proactive skills, communication skills. I like that. Rate negotiations, project management skills. So some of these are hard skills that you have to learn, such as rate negotiation, organization, knowledge, communication, training and development. So when you're talking about knowledge, what are we talking about? Are we talking about knowledge about the products? Are we talking about knowledge about the company? So, that communication, networking, training and development, love that. So when we look at training and development, we'll take that even further down, is how do they understand, what does training mean? Does it include understanding the different pieces of behavioral traits that make up training. Some people learn very quickly and on the job. Some people wanted classroom training. How do you, as a leader, become self-aware of your behavioral traits and then learn about your team and adapt and apply that? So acting as a business partner to senior leadership, those people skills, training. So, you know, we see that there's a lot of information that goes into it. And then when you talk about some of these skills, breaking it down even further. And then overwhelmingly, about 65% of you say maybe. Half would be easy, half not so much. A lot of that is because we really don't know what we do on a daily basis. It has become so internalized with us that we don't think about it. We just do it. So when someone says, "How do you do that?" we go, "I'm not quite sure how I do that." So as you begin your succession planning, you need to ask yourself, what do I need? What do I need from that in this role? So once again, like you said, there was some training and development, some rate negotiations, some communication skills. Then look at your, and I would encourage you to take those larger umbrellas and break them down. So when you say communication skills, is it communication skills from managing a direct report? So those communication skills may be how to motivate in other employees, or is it communication skills on the sales side where it's building those sales and overcoming those objections? Then what you want to do is ask yourself, how can I meet those goals, or who can meet those needs? And then where are the vulnerabilities? So what are their challenges? As you uncover that in the succession planning, that's going to allow you to begin to build your team. Begin to identify your high potentials. And here's a secret. Your high potential may not be that person who is your top performer. You may find that as you begin to look at what you need and who meets those needs, you may have a silent leader on your team who doesn't always need to be that top performer, but they're, consistent. They've got those high standards. They're that resource. So they may not be at the top of the leaderboard, but if they left, you would struggle. And then where are the vulnerabilities? And when we talk about vulnerabilities, those are the areas of coaching, those areas that you really need to hone in on. And as you understand that as the manager, I want you to think of ice. So once you've identified what you need, then identify the position. Whether it's your position, whether it's a team lead, whether it's another position in the organization, and then identify the person. Our people. Who do you know on your team that has that ability to move forward, that has those high potential? And then last but not least, what is the process? And the process is critical. How are we going to take them from point A to point B as part of this succession planning so that they have those skills that make them ready? 90% of the time in our other webinars that we have conducted about first-time leaders, there's a statistic that says about 70% of new leaders fell within the first year, and about 90% fell within the first 24 months. Why is that? Because they haven't been taught how to lead. Your role as a manager, as part of succession planning, is to create a process where you're teaching them how to lead. And they may lead differently from you, and that's okay. Because what you're going to do is cultivate. So as a manager, you need to cultivate your credibility with your employees. So when you say, we have a succession plan, we have a training and development plan to help you reach your highest potential within the organization, have conversations, honor what they're saying. You may have someone who says, I'm really happy where I am. You may have someone that comes to you, and once you start the conversation and you say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? They may say retired. I worked in the financial industry, met with everyone on my team, and I had that said to me in 5 years. So I go, where do you see yourself? And she goes, retired. I'm going to be 65. I want to go tour the country with my husband. We've earned it. And I'm like, great. So does that mean I wrote her off? Absolutely not. But I knew I was going to have a position in about 5 years, maybe less, maybe a couple more. But what could I do to maximize her potential, maximize her skills, her her knowledge and pass that on to someone else who would take their place. You've got to cultivate action plans. So if your succession plan is words written on a piece of paper, guess what? It doesn't do anything for your team. It has to take action. You have to move forward. And then ownership. So you want to take ownership of the people that you're coaching, but you want to encourage them as well to take ownership of what they are doing. So a lot of times we can give them hypothetical situations, but give them some true situations where they can move forward. And then last but not least, you want to educate. So going back to the poll with what skills were needed to take your place, think about that. What are the technical skills that are needed? What are the people skills that are needed? What's the leadership skills that's critical? Because as you begin to understand that, then you can create some of those action plans, some of those succession plans for your highest potential. But let's talk about someone who, remember our poll where we said that your highest people, internal employees, 85% are your top performers? Well, let's look at someone who wasn't necessarily a top performer in his first job, and that's Phil Jackson. So Phil Jackson says performance does not equal leadership. Great leaders understand their strengths and challenges. If you are not a basketball fan, let me tell you about who Phil Jackson is. He was a amazing coach. He was voted one of the top 10 greatest coaches within the NBA league, but he was not a great player. He was limited offensively. He rode the bench most of the time. He was one of the leading substitutes, but once again, they not necessarily one of the top players that was on board. But what he did know is he knew I need to maximize how I'm going to coach. And so what he did is he became one of those coaches that really understood his teams. He won 11 NBA championships with 2 different teams, most combined championships in the league. He coached players like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal. And that's impressive because he had to maneuver around a lot of huge egos, right? And top talent to bring the team together towards a common goal. But he will tell you, I was an okay player. So when you're recognizing your high potentials, don't confuse them with your high performers. Understand the difference. So your top performers, your high performance typically tend to be very job focused. They're effective, but a lot of times they're very me-centric. What do I need to be successful here? I'm going to do the best that I can do here. Raise your hand if you know someone who's an amazing performer, always top on their leaderboard, but are missing some of those critical leadership skills or some of those people skills that would make them a good leader. I'm seeing hands come up all over the place. So yes, all of us know those people. They're great at their job. We can't not have them at their job. But are they going to be happier doing what they're doing or moving them up into management? Have that conversation with them. A lot of times they say, I'm very happy where I am. Your high potential employees are still effective, but they take initiative. They look at the big picture, and instead of what do I need to do to be successful here in this position, they are always looking at what do I need to improve? Where can I go? Where, what's the next step? I think of myself, I started off in banking as a part-time teller. I did not want to stay a part-time teller. I had my eyes set on moving up. So I looked at that job and said, okay, even though it's not naturally suited for me, what's my next step? What do I need to do? I'm going to go above and beyond. I'm going to show that I'm a leader without the leadership title to move forward. When you look at your team, that's what you want to look for is who is that person who's taking the initiative, who's moving forward, who wants to personally develop themselves. Maybe they're taking courses outside. I don't like to public speaking, so maybe they're doing Toastmasters. What are they doing to improve? What are they doing to help their team improve? When you begin to understand that, you're also going to know what motivates them. So high performers typically are motivated by recognition. They want to know what they're doing. Individual goals. They want continuous education. High performers may be motivated by the title because of the recognition. So they want the title of leader, but they don't necessarily want the work of the leader. Whereas your high potential employees are motivated by things like highly visible development programs. Do you have diversity programs in place like women in leadership? Having the opportunity to lead. They want clear timelines. They want the ability to cross train. Tell me what I need to know. So as you understand that, now you can begin to pull in the succession planning. Maybe it's something that you create a cross training program where they are learning new tasks, new tools. When you begin to look at someone and say there's potential there, what's next? Well, you have to understand what their strengths and challenges are. So I always recommend this. It's a quick, easy thing. And whether you're creating a succession plan or just looking at developing your employees, write down what are some of the strengths that you see? What are some of the challenges that you see? You know, they've got great ideas, but they never speak up in meetings. Or, you know, he's really assertive, not unafraid to speak up. But I've had some people say he comes across a little bit too aggressively. When you begin to identify those and write those down, then start to have conversations with your teams. But you can begin to create an action plan. Remember, you've got to cultivate action. Succession planning is not just words on paper, but cultivate that action plan to move forward. To say, here's some additional training we're going to give you. Here are some of the things that I see. What are you going to move forward? And the other thing too is understanding those natural behavioral traits, because some of our challenges are who we are. And so we need to understand some of those tools and tips that we have to overcome them. But at the same time, you've got to understand your people, your high potential. So when you're looking at that level of assertiveness, ask yourself, are they take charge or collaborative? Are they comfortable with conflict or conflict avoidant? Why is that critical? Well, if it's moving into a leadership role, guess what? We can't make everyone happy. And we're not saying go out and look for conflict. No one wakes up and goes, today I'm going to have conflict with someone and I'm happy about it. Most people are like, I don't really want to go to work and have conflict. I can deal with it if I can. But do you want to have that person who says, you know, Carrie, I feel like there's some tension between us. Can we, you know, what's going on? Or that person who silently stews? Carrie, that's the third Diet Coke this week that she's taken from me. First one, I let it go. Second one, it's starting to bother me. I know she knows those are my Diet Cokes. And then they don't say anything until all of a sudden it explodes. Or that manager who just lets things go, lets things go, lets things go. And then all of a sudden, Carrie, I need to talk to you. You have not done this, 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 this. And Carrie's like, okay, now I feel like I can't do anything right because you've just given me 20 things to work on. And you just told me I can't do anything right. So understanding that, so now you can coach them. Are they that risk taker? Maybe you need to pull them back. Are they like that security? So if they like that security, what you may have to say is, we see the potential in you. We want you to move forward, because sometimes your high potentials are like, I'm happy where I am. I want to move up, but I don't know if I necessarily want to push my way, because that's a really big stretch for me. I've never had leadership training, and so now you want me to be a lead. You're telling me I'm earmarked for leadership. I don't know about that. Giving them that information and then slowly take them out of that comfort zone. You've got to understand how they communicate. Are they relational versus analytical? Why is that critical? Because as a leader, how you lead and how you communicate is critical. If they're relational, they're going to want to know that you understand, that you see them as a person and that you are recognizing their effort. If they're more analytical, tell me why you think I would do well for this job. Or coach them, because those analyticals can be a little bit more blunt. Those relationals could be, you may want to coach them on how to transition from a peer to a leader. Do they make decisions on intuition versus logic, or people versus facts? Help them understand their pace. So why is pace important for succession planning? Well, part of it goes back to the training. As you create these action plans, some people want to work on 14 things at one time. Other people want to be, they're very process oriented. So teach me your steps. You know, are they short term versus long term? If you have someone who's very fast paced and you want to communicate with them, we are putting you in our development program, our leadership development program. This program, it lasts 12 months. Once it's completed, you will have the opportunity when a position becomes available. So now they know, okay, not as soon as I complete this program, I'm being put into management, which may not happen. Do they like a lot of change versus routine? As you understand that, now you're creating individual action plans for your high potentials. And then last but not least, understanding their structure. Are they big picture versus detail oriented? So you may have to say, okay, you got to think about the details here. Make sure that you're giving your team enough facts. Oh, wait, you're overanalyzing. Let's bring it back a little bit. Do they like to delegate? Are they that micromanager? You know, like, I'm going to give you this, but I'm a perfectionist and I know I can do it right, but I'm not quite sure about you, so I'm going to just take it. Or, you know, as leaders, we don't always make everyone happy. And so sometimes we have to have that resilience, you know, of saying, okay, I know this isn't going to make everyone happy, but we want to move forward with that. So as you understand your team, as you understand what their natural motivators and drivers are, then you can create those action plans. If you're not sure how to do it, well, then Omnia has a great suite of reports that can help you with it, including our leadership development report that talks to you about how they can lead, talks about their strengths, their action plans, you know, gives you an action plan to work with them. And then as a leader and a manager of those high potentials, you want to really stress your credibility. And I love this definition. It's the quality of being believable or worthy of trust. As a manager, if you recognize someone as a high potential, then you are, and you have that discussion with them, you are making a commitment to them to say, I believe in you and we're going to work through this. What you may find is as those lines of communication are kept open and as they are learning through your succession development plan, that they may take detours. Both of you may say, you know what, this isn't a really great fit for you. Maybe we look at something laterally that you are better suited for, but you can't have that conversation unless you're worthy of trust. How you do that is connect. So you, for your high potentials, you have to talk about their goals, their obstacles, and their struggles in a way that is open, honest, and real. Share some of your challenges that you have because as leaders, what we tend to do is focus on where we are now and not where we were. So as you're having those conversations to say, you know, 20 years ago, I was right there with you. Here's some of the things I've used to overcome it. Or, you know what, you and I are a lot alike. We want things to move very, very quickly. Here's some of the things that I put into practice. Sometimes you just have to be quiet and be a sounding board. So if someone you say, as part of this development, I want you to be able to have that opportunity to come to me and talk to me. And when they come to you and say, you know what, this week I'm just slammed, I don't know if I can do this, you not say, well, we'll take you out of the program, but listen to them. Sometimes we just need to be heard. And then when you're connecting with your high potential, say what you mean and mean what you say. So many times, this is where we fail as leaders. I've got an open door policy. If you need me anytime you come to it, and they come to the door and your door is either closed, literally or figuratively. Come talk to me anytime, but they come to the door and you're just like, as you're still typing on your computer. Give them that attention and be a mentor. So, as a manager of someone who's a high potential, lead by example and then offer them more responsibility. Why is it critical to offer more responsibility? Because you're giving them a safe environment to fail. So many times, new managers, new leaders are afraid to either take on the role or to go outside of the norm because they're afraid to fail. By giving them some opportunities within your succession plan, your development plan, you're giving them that ability in a safe environment to fail. They can come bounce ideas off of you, but if they fail, then you can begin to have some conversation about it. And then create an action plan. So this is all within lines of you want to make sure that you have consistency. Create a mentorship program. You have someone on your team who you say, wow, they're amazing. And this is what I did when I had my employee who was a teller come to say, in 5 years, I want to retire. She had 20 plus years of experience as a teller. She had worked different positions within the bank. I created a mentorship program. She was our training mentor for our region. So every new employee that was hired in 11 different branches went and worked with Darlene. And she was able to coach them. So she was bought in. She was that brand ambassador of saying, this is where we are going and this is what you need to do. But she had the patience to walk them through everything. And it helped develop her. So we were able to capitalize on her experience, keep her engaged while she was still there before she retired, and set a great foundation for high potentials. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, when she said, hey, this person will work out, they worked out. If she said, I don't think they're going to make it, they usually didn't make it. Why? Because she understood the culture of the bank. She understood what we needed. Create diversity programs. So why is a diversity program so important as part of your succession planning? Well, one, it helps with ADA and EEOC compliance, but it gives you that opportunity to focus. Women in leadership is an amazing way to go with a diversity program that also capitalizes on creating a development program for women. Look into that. Say, what diversity programs do we already have created that we could use as part of our succession planning? And then once again, give them some project management. Maybe you have a team and you're working on a high client, a client. Give them, put someone, Carrie, you're in charge of this program. Let's sit and let's talk about this project. And maybe you can work hand in hand. That gives them those hands-on experience, creating timelines, overcoming some of those objections, being the face to the client with a great safety net behind them so that they can move forward. And then last but not least, as leaders, as part of that succession planning, you really have to educate. So we talked about, understanding and really identifying what the position you want to create have a successor for, who those potential people are. You've created the program, you're cultivating credibility, and then last but not least is educate. And going back to understanding those strengths and challenges. As you understand their challenges, is it because of something that they're lacking education? Educating on technical skills. So going back to the poll where you were about 50, when I said, how comfortable could someone step in and ease with your position if you were to leave? About, most of you said about 50%, half and half. That's because a lot of times we forget those technical things. Like, here are the reports that we have to look at and how to understand it. Maybe you look at P&L statements every single month to determine how your location is doing. Maybe you're looking at sales number. Teaching them things like how to complete an evaluation, offering additional certifications. I know someone said, they've got to understand rate negotiation. Teaching them those hard skills. The other skill that you have to educate on is people skills. And this is more for client facing, how to network, how to understand, okay, I know that you don't like people, you're more analytical. I shouldn't say they don't like people, but their natural preference is, I don't like small talk. So putting me in a networking event where I've got to go and shake hands is uncomfortable for me. Now you can coach them, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 5 business cards. We're going to go meet 5 new people. Here's how you work the crowd. If it's public speaking, giving them that opportunity. And when I say public speaking, that's not necessarily getting up in front of making a presentation, making an ask for a client. That public speaking can include talking in meetings. So one of the things that you may teach is we want you to share some of your product knowledge. So I want you to create a 2-minute presentation around this project and teach our group about it. So it may be 4 or 5 people, but it starts off small. I have a coworker who every time she has to talk to more than one person at a time, she starts turning all red and splotchy and her, on her chest. It goes up to her ears because she says, I don't like to talk to people, even though I know I'm an expert of what I'm speaking about. So giving them those opportunities. And then, of course, you've got to teach them those leadership skills. How do you teach it? Allow them to mentor other employees. But when they're mentoring other employees, you can't say, here you go, one and done, take over. You've got to coach the coach. How do they coach? You're not doing that right. You need to do it this way. Well, that's a learning opportunity for you right there. Listening to their communication style. Can they keep people on task, redirect, and motivate as they're mentoring, as you're checking in with them? And not just listening to them on how they're doing, but listen as they're interacting as part of that mentorship. Ask them to evaluate those people with their strengths and challenges. Can they identify those strengths and challenges? That will really help you understand is, do I have a high potential or do I have a high performer? If I have a high performer, how am I going to keep them motivated? And then as you're going there, there's a few do's and don'ts to avoid these common pitfalls. So one, you want to know your people. You want to give them equal opportunities, even if it's someone that you're not quite sure is a high potential. Give them an opportunity. They may surprise you. You want to manage the process. You can't just say, here you go, move forward. We have a succession plan, or you want to be part of that and be prepared for it. And then always look for those potentials. Who is that silent person who's leading from their area, that is that resource? And then have those communications with them. So you don't want to create an unhealthy competition. Succession planning should not be about the title. If you hear nothing else, please hear that. It should not be about the title. If you say my number one person is going to get my job one day, then someone's going to, who has that natural competitiveness, is going to be want to be number one. Always going to be number one. But they may not be the number one contender for that position because they can't put aside that me instinct to change that me of what can I do to be number one to what can the team do to be number one? What can I do to help the team? Don't promote favoritism. So give people that opportunity. So have, when you create the succession planning, as you're creating those high potentials, if someone comes to you and says, I want to move up, then you want to have a set process in place so that you can say, here's what we want to determine. Maybe it's that they take the Omnia assessment. So you can say, okay, this is where they seem to fit in, where one of their development programs. So I want to move into sales. Well, let's have you take this. Let's give you this sales style report that talks about how you're going to sell. Where is it alike with what we need? Where is it different? What are some of those challenges? So we're going to coach you. Can they overcome it? Can they not? We can't have those preconceived ideas about individuals. And this happens a lot when we have the same person in tenure. So we just assume that they want to move up, or we assume that they're just happy. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And then don't make subjective decisions. You want to make sure that as you're looking at your high potentials, that you have a committee that talks with them. Get input from their supervisor. Get input from their peers. Get input from them. You can't just say, oh, you're going in there. Do they want to? Because it may be someone, and then respect what they say. You may have someone who says, I can't do it right now. I want to move up, but I can't do it right now. I just got married. I just had a baby. In my time of right now, I can't take on one more thing. I do want to move up, but I can't go through a training program this year. If that happens, respect that. This goes back to cultivating that credibility of saying, okay, let's regroup and talk about that. Once again, and then also look at succession planning as it's not always moving up, but look at those lateral positions that someone may be amazing at moving forward. And then remember, as we're drawing close, is keep connected. As you're going through this succession planning, be a sounding board and offer guidance. And you want to hold people accountable, including yourself. And then last but not least is nobody's perfect. So as you create the succession plan, it's not one and done. You want to go back and talk about it, address the mistakes that you made. As you're coaching people through their project manager, give a debrief, the good, the bad, the ugly. I always ask, what could I have done better? What did you like? What did you hate? That gives us the opportunity to grow. And then resolve the tension. And that can happen a couple of different ways. So one, resolving the tension is if someone is saying, you know what, I know we went into this succession plan thinking you were going to be the person, but you're not the person. Whether it's because they understand it or you're having to make that difficult decision, you still want to let them know where you see that they're a better fit. Be prepared. Sometimes the tension is resolved where they go, okay, great, I understand it. Sometimes the tension is resolved where they leave. But if you want to know a success story about succession planning, let's talk about Coleen Barrett. And you may be saying, who is Coleen Barrett? Well, I am a huge fan of Southwest Airlines. If I can fly Southwest, it is the first airline that I will choose. And Coleen Barrett, just some of her awards: Outstanding Woman in Aviation. She was named to Forbes' list of 100 most powerful women twice. She served in Southwest Airlines leadership. She was instrumental in creating the Southwest customer service model, which how many of you have ever flown Southwest? Go ahead and raise your hand. So I see some people raising their hand. Raise your hand if you have heard about the Southwest culture. So for Southwest, their culture is all about having fun. And their customer service model is about working with people, understanding. Well, Coleen Barrett joined an established law firm in 1967 as an executive assistant to an attorney who was super disorganized. That attorney was Herb Kelleher. He actually created and founded Southwest. And when he left, she left with him as his executive assistant. As she grew in her role, Herb recognized her potential. He gave her opportunities. He gave her room to grow. He coached, he corrected, and eventually found a successor to the leadership team. So that didn't happen overnight. You know, she was groomed and groomed, and over 20, 30 years, this is where she became to serve in the leadership as an executive assistant. So looking back in 1967, if you ever read any articles about her, she would say, I never really thought that I would move into leadership, but I had ideas on how to create a great culture, and I was listened to and eventually put in charge of creating that culture and that customer service model. He recognized that succession planning isn't a 6-month, 3-year, or 10-year one and done task to complete. It was constant revision. It was recognition and refinement to maximize that success. And that's what your succession plan has to look like. Create one now. As you create it, then you can begin to grow from it and then build off of it and say, how do I work on that? Your succession planning for sales may look different than for service. It may look different for your leadership team, but as you begin to understand that and grow that, then I'm hoping that you find your Coleen Barretts within your organization. Now we've got a few questions. Go ahead and type in your questions and comments at the end. I know that we had one about, can you get a copy of the presentation? Absolutely. So in the upper left-hand corner under takeaways, there is a copy of the presentation as well as that strengths, challenges, and action plan. And as I'm going over this, if you have any questions, you can type it in that share any questions or comments box. but you can download that strengths challenge and action plan that was referred to in our presentation, as well as a roadmap to succession planning. It has those original questions in there for you, where it talks about when, what do I want, who can meet those needs. So it gives you an idea to begin to start that strategic plan for succession planning, as well as this presentation is being recorded. It will be available in about a week on our YouTube channel. So if you don't subscribe, go ahead and do that now. And then follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, like us on Facebook. You'll receive some of those notifications. And if you're interested in some of those information, or you have more questions about our development programs, whether it's training, on-site trainings, development, webinars, or our reports, please feel free to contact me. My telephone number is 525-7117, extension 1222. Once again, I want to say thank you very much. One of the questions I always ask is, Kim, is it able to create a succession plan and quickly? And the answer to that is no, not quickly, but spend the time to do it right. And you have a great resource with Omnia that can help you with that. So I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. Our next webinar is September 21st. Is Got Top Talent. Keep them there with these retention strategies. Plays right into understanding your succession planning. And thank you for joining us. Have a great day.